I made
see our neighbors, but we like to stay on time, be mindful of everyone's time. Big crowd here, big crowd. Appreciate everyone stopping in. And this is our third public meeting, excuse me, not a hearing, to talk about our branding and wayfinding project. I will introduce the presenter today, Nathan Socha from Beta Group, who is our consultant. Put together a very fine presentation, and I'm really, really excited for you guys to all see it. So I'm just gonna bring Nathan right up here. Get started.
All right. Thank you so much, Laura. Thank you, everyone, for coming tonight, and again, thank you for the opportunity for being here. My name is Nathan. Yes, my name is Nathan Socha, and I'm a project manager with Beta Group. We're here to review the project. Today's meeting agenda is to kind of go over the project goals again, discuss the feedback we received last time. So we got a lot of input from everyone. We had a community meeting, a stakeholder meeting, and a community survey, so we want to go over that. We have 3 design concepts we want to review with everyone. And then last, kind of after the presentation, open up the conversation to discussion. Real quick, project team from the town side, Laura, Jennifer, and Fred have been leading this, and then my colleagues are joining remotely, listening in, but myself is Nathan Socha, but also Randall Collins and Deb Howard. The project schedule, back at the end of October, we had a kickoff meeting where we kind of started to figure out what we're doing for this project and developing how we're going to approach this project with a working group meeting in November. And then in December, we had our first stakeholder meeting. That's where a lot of people came in, they gave us feedback on what they wanted to see and how this project should happen. So here we are now, the second community meeting where we're going to go over that feedback and the design. And then from there, we would take this feedback, bring it down into one concept, and then think about how that concept fits within the context of the locations and the environment, how it actually would be rolled out. Real quickly, just for the sake of this project, what does wayfinding mean? How do we see wayfinding? And a wayfinding system is an organized set of signs designated to help people navigate a town effectively and intuitively, is kind of our internal general understanding of it. But more specifically, what is this project's design goals? And so, the way we view this project is that it's a community-driven branding process through wayfinding, and that our goals are really to provide consistency and integration of this branding process throughout the whole town. The goal is to enhance navigation, that wherever you are in the community, you see this unified thing. And to some degree, it's not just about knowing where you're going, but also seeing that consistent branding that gives like a sense of pride in town identity. And that we see the system as a phased implementation so that it would be a natural kind of sequence of signage kind of getting rolled out over time, not just all happening at the same time. And lastly, talking about sustainability, is that this design This branding system really wants to be something that fits into the community and feels like it's always been there, so it has that kind of long-term impact. So here's an overview of the community engagement that we've done so far. Again, it started off with a stakeholder meeting where we got really good feedback from town departments and civic leaders on what they wanted to see. And then from there, we had a community meeting where folks like you came in and told us what their thoughts were. And last, we had an online community survey. And I think one of the greatest things was that when we did the online community survey, we heard a lot of information that echoed what we heard at the community meeting and the stakeholder meeting, which told us there was a real good consensus on how this should be developed. From there, and this is kind of a really high-level overview of that feedback we received, but some big ticket things that were, the district and area identity, the downtown area, really capturing that historic image or feeling, or what is Westborough, but also acknowledging kind of the Route 9 area and like a larger commercial development, and how would a branding element roll into that? How could it be similar but also distinct a little bit as well? And also recreational spaces. We heard a lot from the community about how important the conservation and recreation areas were, and how to integrate them as well. And in more detail, the trail system and connectivity, having better signage throughout there, working with the charm bracelet system, how can we enhance that, QR codes and digital maps and things like that. And lastly, the economic development aspect of it. How do small businesses benefit from this thing, and how do we bring people in from other communities into the downtown area or other areas to highlight that. And what we saw also was there was a lot of community feedback on historical and cultural pride of the community, and you can see the current town seal right here. The incorporation of 1717, which is something I think a lot of people mentioned, in these themes about transportation, including early trails to the railroads, and even having the access to the highways so easily now, as well as manufacturing and the industrial heritage of the area. And lastly, the architectural heritage with a lot of historical districts throughout the community, and kind of how do we highlight those elements? And also kind of digging in a little further onto the recreation and economic connections to continue to do with what's currently happening through conservation and recreation, of providing that consistent wayfinding, letting people know what the different locations are, and having clear signage to communicate that. And lastly, again, the online survey really echoed what we heard, but some more detail and nuance was that a few highlights is that most people found it easy to navigate through, but there's also room for additional people asking for this additional wayfinding. And specifically, what was that? Gateway signs introducing the community to other areas, parking signs, directional signs, and informational signs, whether it be a destination or providing interpretive information at certain locations, telling that story about Westborough was really important. And lastly, a lot of feedback on people providing input on what is the community character, and what we heard was that it's friendly, charming, convenient. The natural and historical assets are really what want to be highlighted, and there was a few concerns about traffic congestion and walkability. And that kind of really what drove this brand development. And we came up with 3 options, and they're based around this historical and cultural character, navigation, and economic and recreational connections. And I'm going to pivot back and forth between a PDF and the PowerPoint presentation, so bear with me as I present each one of these. But the first option is this idea of the horse and sleigh, kind of being one of those early formal transportation systems, and also showing the industrial heritage of the community. This option is shown with a typical serif font, very traditional looking, very historical looking. And with each of these options, we thought about it as a standalone item, as well as the gateway elements. You see the lower, I don't know if my mouse doesn't show up there, a lower image showing the welcome to sign, and then colors. We looked at a lot of different colors with the wayfinding system. And so we were showing the kind of school red or the town red color, kind of a midnight blue, and then white with blue text. Everyone see that okay? So how does that look as a series of signs or a wayfinding system for the community? And we presented this one with blue to kind of give an idea of it. We did different color for each option. But if you can imagine gateway signs at the entry points with a larger primary gateway sign with stone columns or end pieces, accenting that larger for areas where the speed's higher or there's more traffic, and then where there might be less space or more infrequent traffic, a secondary gateway sign, and then a third tertiary gateway sign for more rural roads along the entry to the community. And then kind of carrying that branding of the text and the logo through destination signs. So, each municipal facility or park or something like that may have a, and these sizes would have to be go up and down given the location and information communicated, but carrying that same branding logo over top. And then here you can see vehicular wayfinding signs also carrying that same logo on the top, the same colors and elements. Now, when we get to vehicular wayfinding signs, what we find is that the MUTCD, which is the regulatory authority for vehicular signs, needs to be, it's recommended or required to follow certain font types and things like that. So you're seeing a different font here called Clearview, which is a standard, but we're still carrying the color and the logo through those signs. And then taking that into parking signs. So we want to provide information on where parking is further down the road, so it kind of acts as a breadcrumb to those locations, as well as highlighting parking as well. And then how does conservation and recreation fit into this? And so in this option, we said, well, let's keep the fonts the same, so it has a similar vocabulary, but a different color to kind of differentiate it a little bit and let you know that you're in a conservation area or something like that. But elements of that might include, destination signs, signs that tell you where to go, interpretive signs that give you information about the culture or the history or the environment, as well as trail signs. Going back to the second option, we played off of the town hall's logo, and I think a few other elements. We've seen this throughout town, is using that clock tower or bell tower as an icon there. Slightly different font, but also another serif font, and kind of some strong horizontal lines carrying it through. Here you can see it kind of with the three different colors again. And then with this option, we played with the panels a little bit. So rather than just showing a rectangular panel, there's a little bit of an eyebrow over the top of it with kind of a couple of chamfers on the side. But the same concept of having a primary gateway, a secondary gateway, and a tertiary gateway communicating the same information. And the shape of the sign kind of reflects the shape of the logo a little bit too, so that there's space to allow for it to have a predominant piece of the sign itself, and then carrying kind of that more formal historical sign panel into destination signs and the vehicular directionals, as well as the parking signs. And then for the conservation and recreation, we're thinking, okay, well, what if all signs are similar and that we don't have a distinction between them? Is that a preferred way for it to look? And then lastly, we kind of took those two concepts and we wanted to combine them almost a little bit and trying to capture a few different things. So in this option, we, almost played off of the town seal, where the Westborough and Massachusetts are similar, same font and all that, but we've changed the inner image of it. and where we're kind of capturing the town hall, showing the civic pride, the cultural pride, as well as a similar building to the arcade building, kind of showing that downtown feeling. And then a large tree kind of overlooking on a starry night, highlighting the conservation and recreation area in the town's commitment to environmental aspects. And then kind of the sleigh with the horse being pulled, communicating the transportation. And this is a unique shape to have for brand all the way through, and so we kind of thought about how it might fit into a signage system, and then as well as the colors. So here you can see it with a white background, and that allows for the logo to have a dark, nighttime sky appearance, simpler frame. Same for the vehicular directionals. The vehicular directionals also, there's two different sizes here. Certain sizes are required per speed limit, so you'd want a larger sign if the traffic is faster than 25 miles an hour to allow cars to have adequate time to read them. And then if it's under 25 miles an hour or it's less frequent use, you'd have a smaller sign. Same idea for the parking. And then a similar style for the conservation and recreation. So that's where we are right now, and this is the most important part of the meeting, is hearing from you. If there's preferences, what you like, where you think there's improvement, things like that. As we take this into the next step at kind of figuring out how this wayfinding system would fit into the community. Yes?
Showed the graphic on lots of different signs. You had two different types of fonts. One that looked a little bit more like Times New Roman, and one that looked more, Arial or whatever. I know Times New Roman is an accessible font, but there is a movement to move away from serifs on fonts to make it even more accessible to different types of readers. The fact that you showed two different types of fonts, was that just illustrative, or would you have two different fonts on this town signage?
So there's one location where we need to show a different font, the sans serif font, and you can see that right there. So the ones that say vehicular wayfinding signs, that's where you see the more Arial-like font, and it's a font that is required by the municipal, MUTCD. Let's see if I can remember what this is. Manual for Uniform Traffic Control Devices is the organization. And they control, the brown signs you see on the highway, the green signs you see on the highway, the white signs.
So that would be controlling for those types of signs.
Yes.
But then you're suggesting that for other types of signs that are not controlled would have a different font?
Yes.
So I guess I'm not in favor of that. I think one type of font signage is a brand in itself and would be, I think, more beneficial to the community in terms of recognizing that this is kind of an official sign and it's following the same character throughout the town. I don't see switching back and forth is.
Yeah, thank you for that comment. I think the thought process we had for switching the font is that we wanted actually to be all the other type of font, a serif font, to highlight the historical and cultural aspects of the community. But in that specific instance where we might have where we're required to adhere to the MUTCD, we would break from that requirement while still providing the same colors and the same appearance and logo and stuff like that.
So your only thought process around that was to recognize the historic character through a font?
Yes.
First of all, I don't have an issue with the different font. I like the historic font better, but I understand the need to switch fonts for the directional signs. Is the intention to have all one color sign, or I noticed you had a green sign for conservation. Is there a thought of maybe saying, the red sign or whatever might be for the schools, the white sign might be for municipal buildings, or are we just going to do all one color?
That's a really good thought. I think there probably would be some, if all the signs were all different colors, of course, that'd probably look a little bit too much. But I think the idea of having the schools as the red color, that makes sense, and that you would understand that a building automatically was part of the town school system as part of that. And so I think we're still trying to figure that out. Should it all be the same color, or should there be some variation, like you're saying?
And then was there any thought of incorporating the 100th town into the logo, or, I don't...
No, I think early on it was discussed, and we did receive that, I think, even as a comment from the feedback, but we ultimately did not decide to do that, but I think that's still a good thought.
Hello, thank you for your work. I know how hard it is to bring things down to only 3. I like the red because it's different, and because as soon as you see it, you'll think directional sign, I think. I think the first one is very much like the one we have now as far as transportation. And I wonder, we chose the sleigh that was made and manufactured in Westborough, a 2-person cutter. And if you're going to do a sleigh logo again, I think it should be the one that we were known for and manufactured, very much like the one you have. I like having all one type of sans serif because I think we need to have a contemporary sense and the future, looking toward the future in these signs, as well as evoking the past. And that, I think, is done through the logo. The past is quite evident there, and our pride in it. This logo looks a little quickly to me like a lighthouse. So as I was going by, I thought, well, I don't read Westborough particularly in this one. I do like the idea of perhaps different color signs for recreation and other types of uses versus the pure directional signs. Thank you.
Since I'm the guy who built the trail, or started the trail system, and among other things, negotiated all the agreements with all the, with both the town as well as all the state agencies and all the other land trusts in town, there's a few things that should have been made aware and somehow never got asked or whatever, but we actually have a standard for signs that includes the fact that we provide the logo of the landowner where the sign is located for the trail signs. We haven't put up a lot of trail signs because of challenges. Conservation kept rejecting them, and now we have the situation that we're actually renegotiating our agreement with Department of Conservation and Recreation, and the Mass Wildlife is actually now trying to bar trails and get rid of all the trails on their properties. So we're in sort of a challenging situation on that. But for Sudbury Valley trustees and for Southborough Open Land Foundation and for New England Forestry Foundation, we were supposed to put their logo on one corner of the sign, and we actually have an agreement that spells out what the signs look like, because not the exact construction, but the signs, because we were looking at the time. And the other challenge we have, of course, with signs and with blazes is Westborough has been following the national, what I call the 10% loss a year rule, which seems to be occurring on most recreational trail systems, which is that about 10% of your signs and 10% of your blazes disappear in a year. And so keep them cheap, because unfortunately, it's a major expense. We had looked at doing multicolor plastic blazes, buying them from people, and they were somewhere between 50 cents and $1 when we were looking the last time, and we came up with our own that cost 3 cents a piece. And when you're a small 300 person or less land trust, that's incredibly important. And the same with the signage. The signs have been defaced or other things, and we either use a laminated sheet of paper or we use a waterproof laser printable sign, laser printable thing, so that we can go back out and take, if the sign has just been scraped off or otherwise, which a number of them do, we just slap a new one on. Otherwise, we go and buy the $1 piece of Trex material and put up the sign again, but we keep it cheap because otherwise the cost would have just driven and none of that's reflected in here, and that is in legal agreements with most of the groups.
Thank you for that information. We'll make sure we look into that. That makes sense. I think what we're trying to show with the recreation signs is that it might have a slightly different style, and that instead of being metal and stone, we might choose to use wood. And I don't think we'd be, of course, the majority of the blazes would be painted or a simple metal or plastic object, but perhaps at certain locations you might start off with a wooden marker or something like that to take a person there. And I think there's still a lot of work to go from where we are right now, but we want to narrow it down to kind of one option here when we start to really dig into, like, okay, here's kind of what our ideal version is for a system. How does it actually fit into the community? And that's a process we're just starting to delve into, but not quite there yet. But I think a lot of that, what you're saying about those nuanced things will come out of that system.
When I was looking at the signs, I was trying to think of the perspective of someone who's not in a car. Most of the signs that were on the left side, if we can go to one of those pictures, any one of the three. I'm not good at designs, so they'll all be good enough for me. But maybe one, I think it's one page further down. Yeah, one of these. So most of the signs on the left side look very auto-centric to me. And what I mean by that is, when I look at these signs, I don't know if the road is good for taking a bicycle or running on. I don't know if the parking has bicycle parking or not in it. I would assume, if it's just a P, that there is no bicycle infrastructure there whatsoever. And we're looking at adding such infrastructure in the town. We do have a very short rail trailer right now. You have to hop a curb to get to it, amusingly, but we do have one. And so adding some delineation as to what forms of transit you're implying with these signs might be beneficial. Especially as you move towards the future where people are trying to get rid of carbon emissions and things like that. You're either buying a lot more electric cars or you're doing something different. I think that was the major comment that I had.
Yeah, no, that's a great comment. I think, I'm just gonna. I don't have any comment. As far as, pedestrian traffic and bicycle traffic's a little unique too, but kind of a wayfinding aspect might be a smaller version similar to a trail sign where, you're using a very low-speed vehicle or you're walking or some other mode of transportation. It would want to follow a similar element to this as it gets developed.
For reference, at speed not speeding, just there's a lot of traffic. Oh, sorry. Just for reference, when I'm moving through town on a bicycle, I live about a mile outside of town. I beat my neighbors to the center of town on a bicycle just because of the traffic. So making it like really small font, thinking that I'm moving very slowly, I'm moving faster. So it can be smaller because I'm closer to the sign, but it's almost like I just need more of like a symbol that says, hey, this is a bike-oriented sign. You know, maybe there's a bicycle or a runner or, you know, person pushing a kid carriage, something like that might help catch someone's attention, say, oh, that's for me. Just some ideas.
Thank you for that input.
Yeah.
You go.
Yeah, I favor the maroonish color. On this slide here, I like the one, I can't articulate, not the square, but the curvature at the top.
Shape?
Yeah, the shape at the top. I do like on one of the slides, the first one I think it was, where the areas that are not conservation or recreation, I think a greenness that you had is good. Twice you mentioned as you were explaining it about business being involved in it. I haven't heard anything since that time, and I haven't heard much about how we incorporate business into this. You don't have to answer it now, but I think in the future, business supports everything that we do, and we don't want to be late in keeping them abreast of what we're planning to do. I do not like the white signs, no matter whether it's a combination or all white. I don't think they stand out and help us as we drive. Pretty much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi. Disclaimer, I'm a graphic designer. So first of all, I just want to say I appreciate the presentation. I know that a lot goes into logo development. It's not easy. And to the naked eye, it could look very simple and plain when I know behind the scenes what it takes. Couple comments. I also agree with Bill. I love the curvature on this particular sign. I have a concern about the red. Having done a lot of work for various organizations here in town, including the school and a lot of the signage that happens over at Westborough High School, that red has gone all over the place. It's been called cardinal, it's been called brick red, it's been called, so I just want to make sure if the red is where the town decides to go, that it's consistent, even, thank goodness. I mean, I hate the fact that the high school had their sign stolen for a second time, but the replacement sign, I believe, is the right color red, opposed to before. So I would just like to see the red to be consistent. It can be maroon, it's all over the place. So I think that needs to be decided amongst the decision makers here, that the red is consistent. As far as the serif and the sans serif, I struggle with this a lot myself. A lot of clients have a preference, and how we tend to deal with that is we actually will mix them. So for instance, on the welcome to the Westborough, the town of Westborough, Massachusetts sign, sometimes we'll have both on the one sign. So it introduces that secondary font. And so it's not just coming out of left field. You're not all of a sudden seeing it for the first time on a parking sign. So we have like a display font. And the other reason why using the two fonts, some gives you more latitude and longitude for the size and the name, and you can condense the sans serif font. You have a little bit more flexibility with that. And then you have the traditional serif font. So I actually like having the mix. I think there's a place for both, and they can also be used on the same sign at times. I do agree with this gentleman over here, having some signage that shows it's a walking path or a bike path or something would help. I know that this is preliminary, of course, and there's a lot more that will be developed down the road. I also think, I agree, the white would not have enough contrast. Having to I've done yard signages, and Mark, you just put your signs out. I mean, it makes a big difference. And with the snow, you wouldn't really see anything. The third option that you had, the Starry Night one, that reads very wintry to me. I think it just, and it's also really detailed, and I would just worry that a lot of that detail would be lost. It's kind of complex. And I also agree this looks a little bit more like a lighthouse than our town. But those are just some quick little, comments. But I think overall, I'm liking what I'm seeing, and I know it's a tough job.
Thank you for the input.
So I agree with Chris about the sleigh, and I agree with a couple comments about the lighthouse, and the comment about it being a little too busy. On that last one, I thought it was very pretty, and I did like the fact that it brought in some of the architecture, but I thought it was too busy. I didn't even notice it until you pointed it out, but I realize Route 9 is not currently and probably never will be pedestrian friendly, but we're hoping that the redesign of downtown will be much more pedestrian and bike friendly, and I don't see any pedestrian wayfinding options up here. Is that something that you just haven't developed yet, or aren't showing us yet, or not included?
Yeah, a good question, and thank you for those comments. I do think the pedestrian wayfinding elements need to be defined further, but I think that the feedback we've received today is really going to guide that too.
Yeah, one thing I forgot to mention, can you put the sign up where we have single and then you had a multiple one at the bottom?
Single, multiple.
There was one with the sleigh, the lighthouse, and then there was a combination one.
For some reason, my screen is not showing what is
That's all
on
right.
there.
What I think has not been considered, and I agree, you can't get too much in there, but I think we owe something to the veterans, and that should be considered, whether it's in the multi thing or at least with one or two. You can't overdo it, but think about it. So,
Thank you. All right, here we go.
I don't know what the sign material is going to be, but I do know that the color red fades. And so I like the red, I like the branding with our Ranger red throughout town, but I'm just concerned that the material would be non-fadable, because I think that'll really make our brand new signs look old quickly if they do fade. Because we've used that red paint on the Historical Society sign out front, and that's the first thing that went, is the red.
Thank you. Would you guys be interested in kind of doing a show of hands for a few different elements, like preference on the logo, preference on the color, preference on the shape? Would that be, everybody open to that idea? Please.
Have you considered actually introducing the red and the blue? And thank you for saying Ranger red, because that's how we do refer to it. The Ranger red and then the navy blue. Is there a way that there could be some additional, like maybe a border underneath that has like one extra layer of information, but it introduces the navy? And so then if they do, you're not just seeing red and all of a sudden blue signs start to show up. But if the blue is somewhere on some of these red signs, is that an option?
Yeah, absolutely. We could experiment with that. Yes.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you. I like the idea of just, picking a color and staying with it, obviously. Just thinking about the signage in the downtown area, it gets a little more congested signage-wise, so I think we got to pick a nice muted color that's consistent from the time you hit Route 9 to the time you hit Route 30. But like I said, when you get downtown, it doesn't want to clash or get too busy into other commercial signs. As far as the logo, I think this is, pretty strong. It does look like a lighthouse, I guess. But the sleigh seems a little more original to me. I've never seen anything like that. It's hard to make it out on the street signs that we have because it's so small. But I like this, and I think people will ask, why the sleigh?
Thank you.
So has there been any kind of list created as to where these signs would go in terms of, you have a welcome to Westborough, and we know we wanted to kind of brand ourselves at the entry points, but is that part of the planning, like where signs would go, and what are some of the priorities, in a sense, around changing the signage in town? Because it is expensive.
Yeah, so, it certainly wants to be thank you for that question, and I think that's where we're going to be going with this. But yeah, a phased approach, of course, I think is the way to go. So over time, as signs fade and no longer are hard to read or a new building happens, I think that would be a part of that process of doing it. But also, I think there is some money allocated to the effort of changing some signs so that you kind of have that branding process begin. Also the location, so that's really the next step, is once we kind of narrow down a specific design, we start to implement that. And I think we show this kit of parts as a starting point, but I think as soon as we start looking at this under the context of the locations it'll go, where are the pedestrian locations, where are the bike locations, the trails, to your point, and specific things like that. We're going to shape this thing and shift it a little bit here and there to make it work with Westborough, and that's kind of the next effort.
So if I may, we do have some money in our grant that will go towards fabricating and installing some signs. It's not an endless supply, so to your point, once we can get to what's the design, what's the color, what's the shape, before beta finishes, they'll have a list of locations or destinations that we could put signs up as well. So it is a phased process, but in the end, there should be a few signs that will that will be put in place.
Yeah, I'm still concerned on the, what I'll call the trail signs in general, on colors and the like, because we have found that color signs or even just colored maps have faded typically less than a year. Even with putting a UV overcoat spray on after you've printed it or something, and unless you start going expensive. And I know the land trust is not going to go expensive, and I'm sure New England Forestry and Southborough Open Land don't even have signs on their properties in Westborough, as I say, I'm still negotiating with DCR. I don't know what the signage rules are going to be with the new contract. And so there's a lot of questions there on trail signage. We've already told conservation they're going to go to colored blazes on the trails. Well, a lot of the trails go from town land to state land to in some cases, land trust land. Well, the land trust land, we're doing white. We're doing the standard blaze we currently do. We'd gotten approval of that in the past for DCR. So we may have the situation, you're walking down a trail and you're getting red, and then you get white, and then you get, if DCR requires it, it may go to blue. So I'm not convinced that's a good thing for people finding their way through the woods.
Yeah, no, that certainly does make it confusion if there changes colors. And I think, and this really hasn't been worked out yet, but presumably we'd kind of start off at the unifying the entry sign of each park or recreation or conservation area as part of that process through a phased approach. And I think the blazes, to your point, might be a little bit more complicated, and I think that has to be worked out over time to find a good compromise.
That's even confusing.
Oh.
The other side, well, west. You can't walk, you can't walk.
Thank you for that level of detail. And I think when we did this, we weren't, getting it down to that level of detail yet, but just showing a typical example of an area that would, potentially be. And I admit that the arrows pointing to the different locations on the directional signs aren't for a specific location, just communicating the idea that you'd have different locations for each sign, and, that'd be the idea.
Did you want to try to do some of the?
Oh, yeah. So would everyone could you do a show of hands if there's a preference for a logo? And I guess I'll say the sleigh is option 1, the town hall symbol is option 2, and the winter scene is option 3. Is there a preference? Could we do a show of hands for option 1? How about option 2? Option 3? Thank you. And how about color? How does everyone feel about the, what was the name of it again? Ranger Red? Ranger Red. Preference? How about Midnight Blue? And white? All right. And lastly, for the shape, simple rectangular. Sorry, I'm skipping around here. A more ornate shape, and then a little bit of a simpler shape. All right. Yeah. And then lastly, how does everyone feel about keeping the recreational color signs to be consistent with the overall wayfinding, or using different colors? Is there a preference for the whole system to be the same color? I guess would be the first option. Is there a preference for keeping all signs, including the recreational signs, as one color? So everything Ranger Red, for example, or differentiating the recreational signs or the school signs? So option 1 is everything the same color for the background, and option 2 would be differentiation of colors. Right. We have 1 and 1. How about option 1 again? Show of hands. Option 2, mixing colors.
Type of logo on the recreation sign. Partnership with the land trust.
Thank you. Question?
I just want to say I may have voted for option 2 because it was the Ranger Red color. So I don't have a huge preference on shape. I just don't like the white. So that if this shape is a little less expensive, and we get more signs that way, I'd rather have more signs than worry about an ornate shape.
Thank you. And general rule of thumb is that I don't think the shape will drive the cost too substantially, but when fabricating signs, each cut does cost money. I'm sure graphic designer will share the information on their thoughts on that. So the more ornate it does, the more expensive it would be. And of course, we want this to be sustainable and a long-term solution. And there might even be some variability in that certain signs might not need formality. Question?
So,
I'd just like to add a little bit on to this idea of the conservation, the conservation recreation sort of theme that we've talked about as a kind of accessory. There's actually a number of groups in town that are interested in signs. As part of the Historical Commission, there are groups who ask us about different historical interpretive signs. There's also issues about wayfinding in terms of handicap accessibility to a certain location, things like this. Sometimes we get asked these questions, and I've been kind of waiting and sort of hesitating and pushing this off, knowing that this is coming. And I think in an ideal scenario, what my hope was that through this process, there would be a kind of, for lack of a better term, a kind of plug and play option where for different scenarios like historic districts or historic sites or for example, even accessibility to a historic site, that we would have a kind of, in a way, a hierarchy of signs where you could kind of go through and say, well, we don't need a top dollar, shiny gold sign for this type of thing, but we might need it for this kind of thing because it's an important site or something like that. So I think in terms of the kind of, I appreciate obviously the graphical kind of consistency in each of these presentations, but I just wanted to kind of highlight the fact that the conservation folks aren't necessarily the only ones with a sort of a sign that might be a little bit different. Whether the historical signs that point out historical, right now most of what we have are plaques like attached to stones right now. So the question is kind of, there's been voices and a kind of a growing interest in kind of elaborating on some of those. Sometimes we just have a stone with a date and a name or something like that. So there's been sort of a push for some additional interpretive signs to a certain extent. So I guess the question is, I'm thinking about in terms of, what are those going to look like and how are they going to, because typically those types of signs have a kind of a nice quality about them. In Northborough, they're all like brass plaques, with the black background and the brass. And different towns have different strategies with it, but it would be nice to have a kind of graphical consistency where one can even, and that brings me to the third logo. And while I do think it could get lost in some of these signs, I think it is the richest in terms of its potential. I don't think necessarily that it's like, I wouldn't be ready to sort of sign off on it right now. There's a lot going on in there, but I feel like it has a lot of potential to maybe become even a little bit more simplified, not quite as simplified as the sleigh, but I just would urge you not to sort of give up on that third one, even if it's not the most popular one. So I guess just a couple of thoughts from the historical side.
Thank you. And I think that at the end of the day, what we'll have is kind of a master plan for this. And, we'll never be able to think of every single sign, current or future use that the town will need. But, the intent would be that the guidelines and the thought behind it would provide kind of a, guidelines more or less for how you might go about creating a sign that doesn't exist yet or that might not be the right size or the right shape. And I think the intent would be like to make it similar and follow the essence of it, to have it feel consistent.
And if I may, I just want to also point out that this process is not changing the town seal, or this is, this is just for signage. So I just want to just reiterate that, because I know at one point I confused myself. So just make sure that that's well understood. If we have more comments, we can stay. It's about 7 o'clock. I don't want to keep everyone. Happy to talk more. How does everyone feel? Have we said enough? So then the process, this is being recorded. So it can be seen again. It'll be seen by a few people who already said that they weren't able to make it. We will take comments for another about a week or so. Additional comments that weren't said here. There'll be some more smart stuff going on at Beta with the design, and we'll learn some more. Then the location and the destinations will start being worked out, as well as sort of what real signage, what it might actually look like. So in the end, that we actually have like a master plan for signage. But thank you, everyone. These comments were great. We're going to take them all and go back.
Thank you.